Hey, what's happening, everyone? Pragmatic Addict here. So, I just got done seeing Stopmotion. I don't know how long this review's gonna be just because I don't know exactly how I feel about this movie yet. I don't know what all I want to say about it. But basically, between this film and Lovely, Dark, and Deep, which also came out this weekend, it was that thing where it was like, from the flip of a coin where I was like, do I go and see the new IFC really original looking stop motion movie called Stopmotion in the cinema? Or do I go and watch Lovely, Dark, and Deep, the XYZ produced directorial debut starring Barbarians Georgina Campbell, from home for only $5.99? Yeah, flip the coin. Saw Lovely, Dark, and Deep yesterday. I actually started to do a review for that one, but I just wasn't feeling it. The movie was very fucking mid, and like halfway through my review, I was like, kind of want to save my energy to see how I feel about stop motion. And it was that thing where I was like, you know what? It's review time anyway. It's that time of week. Regardless of how this movie was going to land, I was going to talk about it. That was what was decided. I bought the ticket, no turning back. Let's try and talk about stop motion. So the plot here reads, a talented stop motion animator becomes consumed by the grotesque world of her horrifying creations with deadly results. I mean, the only reason why I'm looking this up is because I was like in my head, I'm like, how do I describe this film? Hey, if that's the plot, I mean, that's what I went in with. If you guys want to see this movie, that's what you're going in with. But what I'm going to say first about this movie is that how it opens up with this kind of like flashy, psychedelic, like dance cinematography where you're seeing our main character, but there's a bunch of different strobe lights that are constantly flashing with different colors, but with each like half a second of a flash, you're seeing her face like kind of like disoriented. You're seeing it kind of shift. Things are just obviously not good. But I admired it because I'm like, okay, for an indie, very experimental, very original seemingly like horror film, with its big thing being like mixing live action with stop motion, that like obviously resembling and playing homage to stop motion, how it looked and everything, I was like, dude, that is fantastic. I was really excited from that first shot. And what I was really surprised by is just how present and fluent the stop motion aspect actually is in this movie. Obviously, stop motion is very difficult. I don't know how, like, to what degrees and measurements they pulled it off with this film, but typically it takes, it's a very long process. And I thought this was, well, actually, I don't really know what I thought this movie was going to be, but I did not expect it to be this consistent as far as stop motion, where it's to the point where you always feel some trace of that, like of the stop motion aspect in this, live action world of this movie. Whether it be with like tricky cinematography or just the traces of it again, like in the background, or just like the linger of it. The film really does feel like how I think people are gonna go into this film hoping and expecting it as far as cinematically. Which I think that the best way and the most or at least the most appropriate that I feel like describing this film is that the whole theme of stop motion, it feels like a haunted, like a classic horror story where the stop motion aspect is actually like haunting this woman. It's haunting this artist in her real world. And as far as like how twisted of a tale and blend that the story teases, like in its plot and how the trailer teased, it really is always there to some degree. And again, it feels like it plays homage to classic horror stories as far as mystery, as far as lore, and it just as a haunting film with this really different kind of a spin, obviously. And I'm sure that a lot of you can imagine and, maybe even expect that this movie feels pretty bizarre. It goes to some pretty bizarre and complex routes and is certainly not for everyone. This feels like it's directed for a very specific kind of indie horror audience, which already indie horror films in general and experimental films are already for a certain type of, cinephile, but I feel like this one really pushes that. It's very unique. It feels very artistically written as far as its crafting. But again, this does have traces of a classic horror story and tackles themes, such as like insanity and obsession, among other themes. And I feel like the closest I can put this in the category as far as like being directed as like, at casual and mainstream fans is that it still does land regardless as just a different horror viewing experience for whatever audience you are, mainstream, indie. Be warned though, this is a bit of a slow burn, and again, very experimental film, which means it's also very psychological, it's also very subtle. There's a lot of different, ways to view this film. There's a lot of, this is a film that could go very high into like the theory and the like analyzing category. It's one of those films. And with such an expansive world like this, with so many themes and, also just plenty of homage to classic horror, as well as having plenty that it does originally, not being able to predict anything in this film, whether that be its story, scares, limits, it was just so refreshing. Though I do think that because of this, there's also, again, obviously a lot to the film, and there are definitely times where this film really does shoot for the fucking stars. This is still one of those very polarizing, very experimental indie horrors that while it does a lot as far as like themes and story and so on, it is also one of those indie experimental horrors that kind of does everything and maybe even whatever the fuck it wants just because it is this out there of a movie. It's obviously not combined in a small box. And while I think that mainstream fans could still enjoy it, I think that to fully gain from this film, you have to really just let your guard down and be prepared to go in with an open mind. And just regardless of how impressive and fun the endless opportunities this film could have may sound, it could also be equally exhausting and just come off extremely far-fetched. I totally get that. And I can totally see, just from my viewing experience, that this is going to be one of those experimental indie films that people are going to love, people are going to hate. It's nothing new to the weird-ass indie fucking genre. I don't know if I'd watch this one again personally. I am admittedly pretty damn mixed on it, but just because of how much respect I have for this film as its own thing, I am going to give this one a pass. On the way home, I was like, how do I feel about this movie? What did I think of it? What do I think of it? Not just like a viewing experience, but as a movie. Did I even get it? I don't know, but from what I saw and what's sticking with me after the movie, I feel like it meant something. It was there. Something was solid in that. It just is very out there, but I still respected it, again, just for how different it was and just as its own thing. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for my thoughts on Stop Motion. Let me know for sure what you guys thought about this movie, obviously without spoilers. Come to think of that, I don't know if you can tell me your thoughts on this film without spoilers. I just want to know more about it. It's definitely worth a second watch, but I just don't know if I see myself going that distance for it. But regardless, guys, let me know what you thought about the review in the comments down below. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.